It's almost here. There's more practices coming for your Kansas City Chiefs. Who's going to stand out and who's going to make a difference? We're going to get all that information today from ChiefsDigest.com's editor-in-chief, Matt Derrick. We're going to talk to him right now on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors. The offseason's in full swing. Welcome back to this show on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform, including YouTube. Like, sub, hit the bell. Go check out ChiefsDigest.com and get everything that you need there from Matt Derrick, who is our always special guest on Wednesday here today. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. Thank you for making us your first listen. Go check out another Locked On show for more. And always go sub over to my new Substack at NFL33.com. That's league-wide type stuff. A little bit different than what you're used to here, but definitely fun and informative. So, with all that out of the way, and everybody's now rushing to Chiefs Digest. What are they going to find there, Matt? What is your take of the day or the week, or what are you excited about right now?
Well, obviously, you can catch up last week on, what the kind of wrap up was from the first couple of days of OTAs and what my kind of impressions of the first practice that we got to watch last week and everything. In general, I think at this point you probably have heard, barring the holiday, about, really what was the theme of last week, which from Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, it was just spreading the ball around. Everything that we've talked about this offseason so far about how you're going to replace Tyreek Hill and you're going to make this offense better and you're going to adjust to the things you saw last year, you got to get everybody involved. And that's what the Chiefs are doing right now. They've got a laundry list of receivers and options that they're going to go through. Brett Veach has definitely thrown numbers at the wide receiver group. Yeah. I think they got some pretty good numbers, as a matter of fact. I think they're going to have some tough choices down the road once they get to training camp and everything. But that's what it's about. It's about, getting Mahomes new choices, new options, getting him onto the same page with those guys, getting those guys up to speed with the offense and teaching them their roles and seeing who clicks the best and who's going to earn Mahomes' trust that when they get into the regular season and it comes down to crunch time, that it's just not the ball going to Travis Kelce, that it's going to be going to some other guys too.
Well, and earning Patrick's trust is key to getting targets and getting the ball moving. We're going to talk about how that happened so far this offseason later in the show, folks. Don't miss that. But I've been excited for what I've seen so far and heard about MVS. I like the concept for both him and Juju Smith-Schuster because they have experience outside of this offense. What happens when a new guy with veteran experience comes into this offense? Generally, they get asked to do something or get the opportunity to do something that they're not necessarily used to doing. I think that bodes well for both of those players. Do you?
Yeah, it does. If there's one thing that Andy Reid's always going to try and push his receivers to do, and that's to play multiple roles and to be able to do everything on the field. Now, that's difficult to do in an Andy Reid offense in year one. You've got to be an advanced receiver. You got to be somebody who can pick things up quickly. And yeah, MVS and Juju, I think, are experienced enough and high IQ receivers enough that they probably can do that. And they're going to be able to then be challenged to do maybe some things they haven't done in the past. And, the question is going to be, who else can do that? If anything, I think that one thing is that, McCole Hardman's been asked to do a lot of things in the past. And the one thing is, I think he's going to be asked to do less this year, but more what he's equipped to do, which could be a good thing for him. And now, some of the other guys, go back and remember Tyreek Hill as a rookie. Tyreek Hill wasn't playing three different roles. He wasn't doing, he wasn't moving around from position to position. It was getting him one spot where he could learn how to do. And that's what they're going to be asking of the young guys that are coming in, is just to learn one thing and do that very well. So that's why, hey, if Justin Ross makes this team, probably not going to be an every down receiver. He's going to be a situational player. And that's not a bad thing. That's just what you got to do in Andy Reid's offense.
That's how it works. And there's a lot of hype and a lot of interest in Justin Ross, and that is for a good reason. If you guys want to see a film breakdown, we have one over on RGR. Go check that out, of his college antics. There's a lot to like there, and I understand why everybody's excited about that. How that progresses is certainly going to change here in the next couple of weeks, and then clearly in training camp. And besides the excitement about him, the other excitement that I'm a little surprised at is the fan base seems to be very fired up about Justin Watson, former Buck, coming over, another guy with experience that gets to try something new. I I generally feel that 5 and 6 are guys that have to contribute on special teams. And I think that he's got a little bit of background on that. But when I looked at snap counts, it's not that much. So it does look like it is about pass catching for him. Is this something that there's a true fight there for 5 and 6? Or is it just a wide open field right now?
Oh, I think it's a wide open, challenge across everything. I mean, even if you go down and think about, who are going to be the receivers that are going to make the practice squad on this team. I mean, we talked about it last year and that there was some depth, that maybe that there was a guy like Reese Fountain, who was on the bubble of the roster, that, hey, maybe if he doesn't, fit in Kansas City, maybe he's got a job elsewhere. This time around, I mean, a guy like Fountain might have a really, really tougher job making this roster in this group. There's going to be other guys that could probably play. I mean, Mahomes said it himself on Thursday. There's probably going to be some guys that don't make this team that could play in other receiver groups around the league. And I think that's true. I mean, yeah, you don't have Tyreek Hill on this team, but I think the competition for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it's going to be tough. I mean, and I'm probably partially responsible for the Justin Watson thing, because I was really impressed with a couple of plays that he made at practice on Thursday and asked Mahomes specifically about that. And that got him talking to him about his speed and everything. And that's, with the emphasis the Chiefs have gone out and gotten a lot of guys that are big, like Juju and MVS and these kind of things. Remember, one bread and butter of the Chiefs offense has been speed. And Watson's been a guy that maybe he's the guy that's been buried on the back of the bench in Tampa. And maybe he just needs to come to a place where maybe speed's better appreciated and can be exploited better. Maybe Kansas City's the right fit for him to finally get it all to click. We'll see. But I think Watson's another great example, a guy who may not have been on a lot of people's radars, but I think shows the depth of that group. If you got a guy like Watson who's getting reps with Mahomes early on, went down to Texas and impressed him, I mean, that's just adds to the depth of that group. I mean, they've got a lot of numbers there.
Yeah. I was trying not to point the finger at you.
So I went ahead and took the blame completely. It was my fault.
But hey, when you do it, you do it. It's a really interesting case for him. And like I said, I'm not going to rule anybody in or out of the 5 or 6 position. The first 4, I feel really confident about. We can go over that another day, but we got to get to some of the other guys that this week it becomes more important for. We're going to get to that after I tell you about our pals over at rockauto.com. So we are back here with Matt Derrick from ChiefsDigest.com. When you're putting together a roster, you got to have a philosophy, and sometimes things don't work out. I don't think that Brett Veach meant to go into this phase of the offseason with the pass rushers that he has, but that's what he has. So adapting on the fly, trying to then strengthen the defense in another way to maybe make up for what you thought you might have, another veteran coming back in later in the offseason campaign, that kind of thing. The secondary becomes that much more pertinent and critical. And I feel much like the wide receivers that there's a good volume of players there that could make this roster. And just as we go through the second week, what are you looking to see from the secondary in particular to make you feel like that's coming along and might be able to actually help the front?
Yeah, that's the one other position other than quarterbacks and receivers that this time of year is designed for. I mean, now say, hey, as your defensive back, you can't get your hands on guys. There's no bump and run and everything, so you're still a little bit limited in what you can do. But you can at least see if guys are in the neighborhood. You can see, with returning players, if there's some progress there and there's some development. And honestly, I've seen that. I mean, even in the limited work that we got to see in week 1. I thought some guys like DiCaprio Bootle and DeAndre Baker, I think you could see a little progress there. Certainly having an off season, you're starting fresh and maybe everybody's healthy. I mean, helps a little bit there. But I put Zane Alexander in that category too. I mean, I think you got Zane Anderson, excuse me. I think you got a couple of guys in the young player group that's coming back that you're seeing some progress. And then the question is, how do the rookies, especially with all the rookies that the Chiefs have in the secondary, how do they fit in? And, from what we've seen so far, I mean, it's very easy for me to pencil in, McDuffie as a starter in day 1. I mean, I think there's a role for him. whether it's as a full down starter on, from week 1 on, whether he's a nickel type player. I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, he's going to be in that rotation. I think Cook's got a potential. I mean, he's definitely looks like a leader out there. He was very vocal on Thursday when we got to see him. That's a sign that I really like to see in young guys, that they're not afraid to speak their mind and let other players know. And, whether it's even give them encouragement or put them in the right place. I mean, Cook, you could see Cook doing that. And that was encouraging to me. What we haven't gotten to see, though, is, the starting lineup. I mean, L'Jarius Sneed wasn't on the practice field on Thursday, or wasn't practicing on Thursday, at least in taking part in the team reps. Rashad Fenton's on the sideline right now. So all the young guys are getting some opportunities, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, Fenton and Sneed, you know what you've got in them. The off season, these OTAs for them is really like about knocking off rust. To me, it's not a big deal about getting them out there and getting them reps, because honestly, with the numbers of young guys that the Chiefs need, those young guys need the reps more than those guys do during OTAs.
I agree, and I gotta ask you point blank, because I seem to be the only person covering the Chiefs that is interested in another veteran who's getting looks now, because Sneed and Fenton are absent. And my expectations for Lonnie Johnson are higher than I think most. And I view him as an upgrade over the same kind of maneuver the Chiefs made for Mike Hughes last season, who did end up playing significant snaps and was able to lean on his experience. Initially for you, like, I'm looking for this to be a week forward for him to take more snap count, to earn that. Do you think that that's possible, or am I just completely putting too much into his stock as I originally evaluated him?
No, I don't think you're putting too much into him at all. I mean, the Chiefs wouldn't have made the move that they made to go get him if they did not see him as a serious candidate for this roster, and somebody who they felt like could definitely be one of those front rotation guys. Whether or not he were to move up ahead of a Rashad Fenton, and maybe he's got that opportunity because of Fenton's coming off the injury and everything. When he gets back onto the field, hey, let's see what happens. Maybe there's an opening there for Lonnie Johnson to kind of push his way in. But I think that, I think the one reason why that maybe we're not taking Johnson's, roster bid a little bit more seriously, and just, where he could fit into this rotation, is that he was completely misused in Houston. They jerked him around in so many different roles, in so many different places, plugging him at safety at times, and, and in and out of the lineup. He never really got an opportunity to really to do what he's best at, and to just do that. And now the Chiefs have committed to that. Hey, we're going to slim down his role. We're going to take some things off his plate. We're going to get him doing the one thing that he's good at. And yeah, I mean, with what the Chiefs gave up, was what conditional 7th. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's no risk, no harm. And I think that's why a little bit of it is, people are saying, hey, this was just a flyer. If it works out, it works out great. But I'm with you. I mean, I think the Chiefs are expecting more from Johnson. I think that they really hope that he sticks on this roster, that he becomes an integral player, that maybe he is in that top 4 rotation guy. And if that means that some of the younger players, because they took 3 corners for a reason, hey, if one of those guys or 2 of those guys are in the practice squad and just need more time to develop, that's not a bad thing, especially at that position. I mean, getting some time to grow rather than just throwing them out there and forcing them to sink or swim in year 1, that's a much more encouraging development pipeline than the Chiefs have had for corners in the past.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I put him, and particularly Jalen Watson, in kind of the same type of role, the Bashaud Breeland type role, the long, physical, probably susceptible over the top to deep speed, but that kind of role, like Sean Smith before him in this defense. It's been a recurring role, and as much as it might anger fans, the sizable physical corner that maybe can't run with the best of them is still something that Steve Spagnuolo values. I see that as a great development path. If Johnson can push Fenton, that's great. But if Jalen Watson can make the practice squad and come up with Johnson and with the rest of this crew, I think that bodes well for the Chiefs' future.
Yeah, I think it does. And the one thing that this, cornerback group really needs is some experience. And that's why, to me, Johnson making this team is even more important. Because if he doesn't, I mean, really, your veteran leader of that group is L'Jarius Sneed. And I love Sneed and everything. That's not a knock on L'Jarius, but he's a young player still. He's still kind of growing and maturing into this role too. Johnson's got maybe a little bit more experience from just even a playing time standpoint, and even like maybe a big time playing time standpoint. So I think that's important. Even if Sneed were just, because I think that hey, Sneed's a great player. Is he a leadership of a group type of player? Just saying that he's not is not a knock on him. Not everybody's like that. But if Johnson can bring some experience, and be another guy that these young guys can look to, I mean, I think there's tremendous value in that, because that's the one thing that this corner group is really missing is experience.
Yeah, I think it's critical. And you gave me another idea. I do want to ask you one more thing specifically about L'Jarius Sneed and what this future looks like, as well as what the rest of the offseason is after we get back from this. So you sparked my brain there. And when you take a look at L'Jarius, great first year, they asked him to take on a lot more, not just in terms of what I think are more difficult snaps into the nickel, but understanding and knowing both roles, being able to adapt, being able to align not just himself, but the guy that he's playing next to, depending on what side he's on. My big thing for L'Jarius this year is I don't want him to have to be that vocal leader. I don't want him to have to take that onto his plate, because I think this is the year that he takes another big step forward. If he doesn't get overloaded, particularly mentally, in having to do multiple roles, multiple things, and then lead the group as well. Am I not giving him enough credit?
No, I think you're giving him appropriate credit, and you're just saying that from a player standpoint and from just being able to develop and mature and grow, you can't put the weight of the world on everybody's shoulders. I mean, that's where you've got to be able to spread it out a little bit, and that you need that base of not only just experience, but just even numeric strength to be able to just not everything's on one guy. And the Chiefs have probably been in that spot a few times, and sometimes they've been in a spot where honestly maybe there wasn't anybody. The last couple of years, that corner group has continued to be so young that they were really still leaning on guys like Tyrann Mathieu and Eric Berry to continue to be the leader of the entire secondary, and not just the safeties, but the corners too, and to be the guy that they look to. It helps out if you get somebody in your position group that you can really lean on. And I think just having more voices in there, more guys with experience, and you're right with I think L'Jarius. I mean, last year, I think vote for him both on and off the field was tough. And there was a lot of things that he had to go through. And, I think just taking some things off his plate and letting him be the guy that he is. I mean, L'Jarius is, kind of a quieter guy. He's, and maybe it reminds me a little bit of Travaris in that standpoint. Travaris was also kind of a little bit of a quieter guy. Doesn't have, that's not necessarily a bad thing with a corner. I mean, we often talk about corners being divas and loud and over the top personalities. And they're not all like that. And, sometimes just letting the guy go out and be himself is important. And if you surround, L'Jarius with some other players that can buck him up and support him and not force the weight of the world to be on his shoulders, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. There's an old military term that my dad used to use all the time. And it feeds into this concept that if you're comfortable in your position, things slow down. The game slows down for you. And if you're slow, then that means you can be smooth. And if you can be smooth, then you can be fast. And that's the progression. And that's what I think I'm really hoping for L'Jarius Sneed this year, because he didn't get to go really make a big spectacle and do the let's get everybody together kind of thing that they did on the offensive side of the ball. So for him, it is more about individualistic. But for Patrick Mahomes getting that group together, it's been a very different thing for him. And the trust that Andy Reid has shown in Patrick Mahomes and being able to organize these offseason workouts, I think that goes not just towards the maturation of Patrick Mahomes, but the recognition of Andy Reid that pandemic, everything, you have to start doing things a little bit different. You have to open up some more options. And I feel like this bodes really well for their offseason and their comfort level as well, and getting to that slow is smooth is fast kind of concept.
Yeah, and because I've joked about it before that, Andy Reid, you can set a watch by him. Because, his former coaches and associates will say, hey, they can look at a calendar and know exactly where Andy Reid is in any particular moment, because he's just that set in just routine and making sure that his team is doing the same thing and they know what to expect. But I also think that he doesn't get enough credit for adjusting to the times. And because I think that if you look at his practices even now versus earlier in, his Chiefs career, and certainly when you go back to Philly, it's continued to evolve. I mean, he does different things. And I think this offseason program, once again, I mean, it's something that if the rest of the league doesn't look to and model and start stealing, I'll be stunned, because this seems like it's really worked for the Chiefs. But you get me going on another topic, which is kind of connected to this, which is, the Chiefs this offseason's been relatively quiet. I mean, we haven't had a lot of controversy. Maybe there's been a few, but there's maybe been some distractions. We got the match with Mahomes on Wednesday, and and that's going to be catching up in the middle of OTAs. Okay. But, to me, remember Mahomes was in a boot this time last year and not doing a lot of things. And the fact that he's on the field for OTAs, even whatever part of OTA he's out there for, and the fact that he's been out there, in Texas the month before, that's a big deal. That wasn't there last year. And two, last offseason, I was really struck by the Chiefs, by how much the players, took a message from Andy Reid, which was get away, power down. This had been 2 really long seasons for the Chiefs, and not just with the postseasons, but with the pandemic too, and making deep runs in 2 pandemic years. I mean, that took a lot of toll. And last year, Reid really told his guys to get away. And I talked to more players who talked about the fact that they went and they did their own things. Tyreek Hill, was very honest with me and just saying, what, I didn't work as much this offseason as I have in past years because I just needed to get away. And there were a lot of players who said that exact same thing. This offseason has been different. I mean, it seems like it really has been, because this team has been more connected than I think that they were last year. But once again, I think that's just the reality of the situation. Andy Reid's taken the reins off a little bit from them. But at the same time, I think it's now allowed these guys to kind of get into the team and get into what the football work easier and better than they have in the past. It wasn't just hey, we're going to ring the bell in April for an off-season program, or we're going to ring the bell for OTAs and everybody's going to show up and start working. Everybody kind of got going a little bit earlier, I think, than they normally do. And even if it's in their own way, that's not a problem. It's different. But I think this team did better work this offseason than they did last year.
Man, I hope that it pays off that way, and the camaraderie comes along, and the chemistry comes along at that diminished pace. I think that allows for more of that. So I'm excited to see it. Let's see what happens this week. We'll get back with you after we see a little bit more and you have more takeaways. Folks, ChiefsDigest.com is where you want to go for all Matt's work. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell here on YouTube for us. Matt, thanks for taking the time and filling us in.
Always a pleasure, Ryan. Take care, everybody.
Everyone have a great day. We'll be back with